Then, in addition to it, I brought into the environmental benefits in terms of the amount of charcoal that is used by coal fire, amount of water that is used by coal fire, 1.32 liters of water per kilowatt hour of energy, 1.32 liters, ludicrous, 1 kilogram of coal burned for 1 kilowatt of energy, 1 kilowatt hour of energy. I mean, it's absolute madness. So then I went on to nuclear, and I just explained the whole process of uranium and the cost, the CO2 costs that are associated with it. And I summarized basically by offering to show them supporting documentation that proves how much a solar plant costs on a cost sale basis on that scale, which is 100 megawatts. And at the end of the day, we are being completely misled. This has become a political tossing ground. What they're really trying to do is they have an intention, a small group of people have an intention to try and go with a beneficial kind of contract system where other people are making astronomical amounts of money that is costing us, the taxpayer, and also the consumer of that power. We are having to pay for this, and for no reason. And they're misleading us as to why they're doing that, and that's what that document was about.
My name is Nobile Ngosi from the Northwest University Climatology Research Group and South African Climate Change Coalition.
What does that do, that climate change group?
Our climate research group, we go around in the community and then we find problems that are related to climate change, like air quality. I'm specifically concerned about air quality, and then we take measurement, and when we measure how much emissions is emitted from domestic burning, so that we can know like how much content, and then we can try to present that in the form of a document, and then we report it to the government. So like we can tell them something is wrong. This amount of people are dying every year because of air pollution, so we need to do something about it.
Do you have any success with them doing anything about it?
Yes, there's been interventions in the low-income settlement in Kwadela, township in Mpumalanga, whereby there's like thermal insulations and then changing of the stoves, and then teaching people about how to burn efficiently so that to reduce the emissions.
How to bake efficiently?
How to burn.
Burn efficiently?
Yes.
Do you feel that burning is still necessary?
People in low-income residential areas actually don't have much money to buy electricity. Even if they do have money, it runs out before the month ends, so they feel like coal is cheaper, and then so they burn coal instead of burning electricity.
But electricity at the moment is from coal anyway, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
But then the emissions now are occurring at a local level, but it affects them.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the problem.
Do you think it's important that the coal should affect anybody at all?
No. Actually, I think we should move from fossil or solid fuel burning and move to renewable or natural sources of energy like the sun. We need to move to hydropower and wind. So,
if you had some advice to give the government from the things that you've been seeing, what would you, if you were the number one person in the government and you could choose what you asked people to do, or what you got the country to do, what would you like to see if you had indefinite money?
Okay, I have two things. The first thing, I would actually like them to integrate education, like the curriculum education, with the environmental studies, so that they can actually, when the kids grow, they actually have a background of environmental issues and stuff, and then to inspire them and to spark that climate activist in them, so that they actually know when they do something there's an effect. Okay, secondly, I would actually like the government to actually do something about the emissions from low-income residential areas, because it's really bad. And yeah.
So typically, how much would you say of the people in townships are utilizing electricity?
There is access to electricity, but then with load shedding, and then the price of electricity going up every year, people actually can't afford it. According to Dr. Mluli, 80% of the population in low-income residential areas still use solid fuels, even with access to electricity, because they can't afford it. So the access doesn't change much. It changes, but it doesn't change much. So we actually need to remove the need to burn solid fuels.
That's a very good statement that you made there.
Yeah.
Can you just outline one more time, if you're, in order to stop the problem that your group are encountering now?
Yes.
It is a very serious problem. What sort of side effects, first of all, would you?
Oh my God, there's environmental side effects, and then there's health. That's like the center of the problem. Like children, especially children and elders, they're actually vulnerable to air pollution related disease, because they are the women are the ones that cook, so they're always in the kitchen, so they're exposed to these emissions. The children are always in the kitchen ready to get dinner, so they're always exposed. And then their physiology, they actually breathe in much faster than adults, so they're actually very much vulnerable to air pollution related diseases. According to, is it David? Yes, like 2,000 children die every year in South Africa due to air pollution related diseases, so it's bad. And then the environmental issues, we have ambient air quality is poor, and then you're gonna have fog, and then there's like environmental issues. It's really bad.
What kind of diseases are caused by air pollution?
We have asthma, and then you have cardiovascular related diseases, and then you have the respiratory related, and then sinuses, and then they increase like the effect of maybe cancer, and it just goes extreme. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to say? If
Yes.
You're now talking to like potentially millions of people, what would you like to say to the rest of the world out there who are watching what everybody who can do something is doing on the ground? And what would you like to say to them that they can do to help you?
Okay, for me, like there's this quote that's like my daily quote by Dr. Martin Luther King that says that our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. So the day we become silent about things that matter. Yes, so when you see something wrong, don't keep quiet. Speak it out, like say something or do something about it. Get your voice heard, something like that. So because my worst fear is sitting in the future with no trees, and then no ocean, no animals, and then my kids ask me, "Mommy, what did you do about this? You saw this was happening, and what did you do?" And not being able to answer that question, it's just gonna, I don't know, I feel like I need to do something, not for myself and for my kids too and my grandchildren. So actually, that's why I'm here. I'm doing something.
How old are you now?
Actually, I'm turning 23 next week. Yes.
Do you think that you are responsible for all the things that are happening at this moment?
For climate change? Okay, partly yes, I am, because the things that we do daily, like turning the water tap and while you're brushing your teeth, that has an effect. And then you burning emissions using low-grade coal, that's an effect. So everyone like does something. Everyone is guilty. You can't say I'm not guilty. Everyone is guilty. But what we can do is to just identify the things that you do daily and try to minimize your effect from the things that you do every day. So yes, everyone is guilty.
If someone came to you and said, if we change the systems of the world completely to something that is in harmony with nature, would you be welcome that, or would you be resistant to changing your way of life that you have now?
Wow, actually I would love that. I would love, because the more people we have changing their lifestyle, the better and the faster the restoration of what we have done. So I actually would love that. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Emmanuel Chisalu from Zambia. I work for Supreme Audit Institution, Office of the Auditor General, as a performance and environmental auditor. Basically, my responsibility involves auditing the value for money in terms of how Zambia is managing its natural resources. Sure.
Have you got anything that you've noticed there that's of concern about your natural resources in Zambia?
Most definitely. With the trees, the natural forests that we have. Every year Zambia loses close to 250,000 to 300,000 hectares of land through deforestation. And that has affected us negatively in terms of rainfall generation, in terms of holding soil intactly to avoid soil erosion, and that is mainly contributing to climate change. So it is of concern, and that's the reason why I've packed my bags to get into the forest and ensure that we conduct the forest inventory, ensure that there is monitoring systems operating effectively and efficiently, so that there is sustainable protection of the natural resources that we have.
Can you tell me what is the reason why you deforest the land? What is the land being deforested to do?
All right, it's through population increase. I'll give you an example. 10 years ago, Zambia's population was half the population that we have today, which is 16 million people. Right. So the population has somewhat doubled, and also unsustainable practices of agriculture. There's a system that we call in Zambia Chitemene system, which involves clearing the bush by cutting down trees. You burn them in order for you to make the soil fertile. And also we've got other aspect of whereas people now, their disposable income has increased, and so they're establishing property. So land as well, in terms of land allocation, it has been a challenge. So people have decided to encroach into the forest so that they can start building and constructing their property within the natural forests.
Are they producing good crops from the land under the forest?
I would say yes, but the kind of crops that they're producing is just to sustain them at household level. Yeah.
Do you grow genetically modified grain in Zambia?
No, we don't. Yeah, it's natural maize that usually is being grown by the small-scale maize farmers, because the small-scale maize farmers are the large they dominate the farming industry in Zambia. So they produce about 90% of the harvest that we usually record every year.
Are you having a drought at the moment in Zambia?
No, though it was predicted that we would have a drought due to El Nino in the previous farming season. But what we recorded was a bumper harvest, and what we have in terms of food reserve, it will be able to sustain us for the next 2 years.
What do you put down the fact that Zambia has managed to avoid the drought when the rest of Africa seems to be experiencing it?
Well, what I would say, it's God's grace, because scientists, meteorologists had predicted that we'll have a severe drought. But I was very happy that my president, the current president, His Excellency Edgar Chagwalugu, had called for a national day of prayer, whereas we prayed so that the will of God should prevail against what man is talking about, that we experience drought, there will be severe hunger, and so on and so forth. So definitely the prayers yielded a positive result, and instead of having drought, we had the bumper harvest. Yeah.
Can you tell me, do you use chemicals in your growing of maize, the way that you grow?
Yeah, at the moment, though, we're trying to move away, shift from that paradigm of using chemicals, because now we understand that the use of chemicals on the soil, one, it disturbs, the biodiversity of small, living things under the soils. So what the agriculturalists are advocating for is use of natural fertilizers, manures. So there's what we call field day extension, where they go and teach small-scale farmers on how to use natural manures instead of using these chemical pesticides, in order for them to kill the weeds or kill the pests that are hovering around their crops.
Do you think this could have had some effect on your managing to go through the drought? Is that your system of agriculture is more suitable for a potential drought?
Yeah, definitely it is. Because there was one way, first of all, they predicted that we'll have this situation, so we were prepared to adapt. And so farmers were being advised to plant drought-resistant crops. So yeah, the drought-resistant crops survived at the midst of minimal rainfall, but later on the rainfall began to increase. So there was information which was given well in advance. Yeah.
What does your group do in in where you work? What do they do what are they making happen in Zambia?
All right, our performance and environmental auditors, simply what they do is to go and assess the state of natural resources or how the environment is being managed. For instance, I was conducting the audit which I just concluded, sustainable forest management. I was assessing the tools, how the system is operating in order to protect the forest in a sustainable manner. So basically we offer checks and balances. If we find out that there's something wrong, we collect those findings, then write to the National Assembly, the policymakers, and tell them that we have experienced or we have noticed such kind of weaknesses within the system of environmental management. And so we give them recommendations on how they can implement the best practices to protect the environment. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And the other kind of natural resources that are not forest, is there people working on that as well too, like your water and your soil?
Yes, definitely. Like this year, we're hoping that we're going to conduct a water audit. We want to see what measures has the government put in place to harvest natural waters which are coming from the rains, so that whenever we're faced with any crisis in terms of a drought, we'd have more stored within our reserve tanks. Because I'll give you one practical example. Zambia has been affected massively by load shedding due to reduced rainfall. So it has affected our economy in several ways, such that small medium enterprises business, they're limping because they usually receive let's say electricity 8 hours a day, and sometimes off production hours. So you can imagine how someone who depends on feeding his family through welding, metal fabrication, or a salon, and throughout the day they don't have electricity, how are they going to generate that money? So now we want to conduct this audit and advise the government that in case of this eventuality which results into, let's say, maybe load shedding, what other alternatives can we have in place apart from investing into other renewable energy? Can we have more water storages so that when the crisis comes, we are safe? Yeah.
Are you considering going into solar energy?
Yes, we are. Actually, that's a big project and one of the campaign messages which our president had and which saw him assume power again. So we want to move just from dependence on hydro and move on other clean sources of energy such as solar and also geothermal. Yes.
That's good.
Sure.
If you had any advice, if you're talking now to people all over the world,
Yeah.
is there anything that they can do in their lives that will change things for Zambia?
Most definitely. My advice to the people around the world is, first things first. I know our desire to use the natural resources. I know our desire to work on the environment. But let us work on the environment without compromising the needs of the future generation. Alright. So what we need definitely is people to live the environment, to eat the environment, to love the environment. The environment should be part of their identity, such that I don't need to have a tag so that I can go and protect the environment. It's a responsibility of each and every person who's living in this world to protect the environment. If we don't, there'll come a day and a time when such kind of beautiful green scenery will no longer exist, because environmental problems are man-induced, and the same environmental problems have got solution from us, the same people are causing those problems. So let's take care of the environment. When you come to Zambia, don't cut a tree, plant a tree. Sure.
So my name is Megan Simons. I'm a master's student at the University of the Western Cape in the Biodiversity and Conservation Biology Project department. I also am an intern with the Agricultural Research Council. So just to give a little background on myself, my project, or my master's project, mainly focuses on the effects that unplanned wildfires has on the Nosterveld in the Kamiesberg uplands. This is a communal area in the Northern Cape. And the study focuses on the effects that fire also has on Lithropappus and Nocirotis, which is an indigenous perennial to the Nosterveld. I think there's a lot of topics surrounding Renosterveld in the Western Cape. If you look at the endemics or if you look at the endangerment of the lowland Renosterveld, not as much is known about mountain Renosterveld, even though there's more patches of it in the Northern Cape and it's more pristine Renosterveld. So for me, it would be, or I'm hoping from my master's project that I can formulate a fire regime for Renosterveld in Namaqualand, and then from that we can also look at conserving Renosterveld in the area. I'm also hoping from this to empower the community members to also extinguish fires. They don't have a fire department in the area, so if we can do some fire training with them as well, with kids as well, this would be really great for the area, and it would be really something that they could do as a community. One of the main causes of the fires would be a harvesting of wild honey in the area. So the kids, they use the erythropeppers, they stoke it, and then they burn, or they'll use the they'll use the fire and then they'll harvest the honey. They don't know how to extinguish the fires properly. So if we can also train them to harvest the honey sustainably, and I think it's a really good thing that they don't go out and buy honey, they actually harvest it from the veld, which is something good, and I think we should continue with that movement. But if we can also just do some training with the kids and tell them there are ways that we can do this, because they have a bit of background knowledge on the bees and the biodiversity in the area. But if I can go and focus mostly on kids, because that's where my passion lies, with empowering children about awareness on the environment. This is something which is usually lacking within our schooling system. So if I can go out and empower them about environmental education, I think this is one step closer to them living a sustainable environment.
Yeah, when they smoke the bees out, do the bees return to that hive?
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It depends on how big the fire is.
It's quite serious if they don't.
It is a quite serious issue that they have in the area, and most of the school children have admitted that they are offenders of this, but like I mentioned, they don't know how to extinguish it properly.
Okay, one of the problems that we have is that the bees as pollinators is probably their most important function, and the honey is used to feed their young larvae. It has been suggested that it would be a good idea to actually not harvest honey in order to be able to have the bees rather develop and grow in number to become pollinators for the other food crops. What do you think would happen in your area if you were to say that to people?
I don't think they'll be too happy with that suggestion. But for most parts, they would listen. They would, if they know this is being a big threat to biodiversity or to the conservation of the bees, I can guarantee you harvesting honey would be something of the past then. They would stop immediately. There will be a few offenders, to put it that way, with kids continuously. Okay?
Are you making a latte?
No.
What are you doing?
You want a latte?
No, I don't want noise. So are you going to make a noise? If you do make it, we'll just wait, make it quick, and then I can finish after that. Sorry.
Just give you warm milk,
Okay, once this is through, then we'll just carry on. Just wanted to say, I'm going to ask you how much information have you got about the damage that's happening, how the bees are dying out. Do you just give me as much knowledge as you have about bees, what's happening in any part of the world, because not many people know very much, and I'd like to find out what you know. Okay.
About the bees, because my focus is mostly with the Renosterveld.
Can you just one last vision for the world? What would you say?
I would say living more sustainably as human beings for us. It is to take this country forward, seeing yourself as going green, as I mentioned. It's a cliche, but it's something I want us to really work on. The University of the Western Cape's Cape Flats Nature Reserve got the award for the greenest campus. That is a small initiative, that's something small. If we can in the next 5 years say that the Western Cape is the greenest province in South Africa, and we take that for the next 10 to 15 years, South Africa becomes the greenest country, I can really vision this and see how awesome it would be, and something we can be proud of as a country if we can just educate ourselves, if we can educate our children, if we can tell them about how it is to live sustainably, source everything locally. If there's stuff that you don't need, don't buy it. With soaps, household products, go local, do everything local. We don't need all these commercialized products. I would feel do everything locally, source everything locally. reduce, reuse, and recycle. Thank you.
My name is Tobile Kumalo. I'm from the Women's Leadership and Training Program. We work with girls and young women, girls, preteens, teenagers, and young women. Preteens are aged from 8 to 12, and teens, it's from 11 to 18, and young women from 18 to 35. What we do is we facilitate sessions on climate change and biodiversity and environmental awareness. We are also a women's organization, so we empower women. We have leadership training as well. How we evaluate our work is to see if women take leadership positions in terms of climate change, biodiversity, and environmental awareness. We also have a gardening project where we have about 120 gardeners with their home gardens. The aim of the gardens is also spread awareness on environmental health and sustainable living. Our gardens are all organic gardens. We don't use any fertilizers or pesticides to maintain them. So everything that we use to maintain the garden is all organic. We also have a citizen science group of girls and boys in terms of biodiversity, because we have a birding club. In that birding club, we also volunteer as citizen scientists to count the number of birds that they are in our place where we live. Yeah.
Where is the place where you live?
We are based in 3 certain different areas. It is Ehlogozi, near High Flats, Guamashu, which is a township, and then Sentokal, near the Drakensberg Mountains.
Are these all in South Africa?
Yes, these are all in South Africa, but in very different places of South Africa. Both are in very deep rural areas, and the other one is in a township. So it is.
Have you been to all 3 areas?
Yes, I have.
Can you describe what they look like for our viewers, please?
Okay, the rural areas, it's deep rural areas. It's houses, rondavels, and a number of houses, and your neighbor is really far away. Yeah, I don't know what kind of description you're looking for.
Okay. Do you find that women at the moment are understanding that they must start to play a bigger role in society?
With the conscientization that we do, women really start to open up and see that it is their time to take responsibility. After all, we do call this planet the Mother Earth. So as Mother Earth, I think we, the women, should take a lot more responsibility at conserving this Mother of ours, Earth.
If you had to outline your vision for the world, what would you like to say that you would see? If you were really powerful and you could make something wonderful happen, how would you see that wonderful thing in terms of the environment?
We promote reducing the use of fossil fuel byproducts. So we are like no fossil fuel. I'm a living example of that. I would say, adapted to climate change or tried myself as a tool for mitigation. I am all natural. I do not need any hair relaxers, artificial hair. I don't use any products that are bio products of fossil fuel. And then we would like everybody else to do that. And we exercise the 7 R's. We have 7. It's reduce, reuse, recycle, repair, re-educate, restore, and refuse. Yes.
Love, refuse. Can you explain each one of them?
Okay, reduce whatever consumptions you are using. What is not necessary, do not use that, because it'll impact on the global climate change cause and effect. Repair. You do not need to go and buy new things. You can always repair what you have to reduce your consumption levels. Re-educate. Tell everyone about these things so everyone could be able to practice them, and we could hopefully make an impact on the environment. Reuse. You reuse what you can. Reuse the food that you eat. Instead of throwing away that lemon that you cut in half and you don't want to use it anymore, just use it on yourself. Whatever you eat, you can put on your skin. Restore broken geysers to save water, because it's all linked. Restore taps. Restore your old clothes. Instead of chucking it down, just restore it so you can reduce your consumption level. Because if you have to use more, then production will have to be more. And we all know that in production of everything that we use, there is so much of a carbon footprint that is left by all of those things. What is that? Refuse. Oh, yes, refuse I think is like the most important, because you have to refuse and be disciplined in whatever you do. Take notice of what you do. How does it affect you and in the environment?
If you were to imagine a world that is living in harmony with nature, what would you say? How would it be in one sentence or two?
Oh, a world living in harmony with nature. How would it be?
Yeah.
To describe it?
It's a difficult question.
Yeah, it is. I think it would be a world where people are a lot more enlightened to take notice that we need this environment a lot more than it needs us. We are like a disease, and for us to keep on living on this earth, we need to be aware and to do as much as we can to stop talking about environmental issues, but really get down to the work and make sure that we conserve biodiversity, that we have enough trees. At least a house has a home garden. So, yeah.
Anything you want to say?
I'd like to say that I think people ask me, so you think you yourself can make a difference? I think, yes, I can. If every one of us play our individual roles into help rehabilitating the environment, we could all make a huge difference. We have home phases. Home phases happen in our area, where we come and have meetings at least twice a month. We talk about different issues. We talk about climate change. We talk about biodiversity. And the birding group, we have one outing every week. And we have workshops. We hold workshops. 3 workshops a year. We have workshops in January, in June, and in October. So these are 3-day workshops where there are no distractions. We are just here to talk.
Do you think in the areas that you're dealing with, are you seeing it going down?
Yeah.
Or are you seeing it improving?
With the awareness we've done on water so far in our community, because we don't work normally in the community, we work with girls. So in the community, I see people are much more aware. And if you spread that awareness, people start to take notice of what they are doing. So I think it is improving.
How are people affected at the moment by negative things that are going on in the environment? Have you seen that?
I've seen what my community has to go through, because they had no idea of the impacts that they would cause by dumping in our nearby stream. And now with all the water crisis that is happening in Durban, I feel like us picking up, because you know every stream leads to every river, and every river leads to Umgene River, which is a dam, which is where we get our water source. And not many people know that. So now they are much more aware, and we have stream pickups with the community and the girls. Doing that sparks something in them to not litter or spread awareness on littering in the streams and rivers.
I spent the last 3 or so years trying to understand what this vague, fuzzy notion of food security means. It's such an umbrella term, but what does this actually mean? And I decided to not look at it from the perspective of the farmer, because we hear about that all the time. What are farmers producing? What's happening with land reform? These kinds of things. I wanted to understand what was happening for 60% of South Africans who now live within the city, who are very far removed from the soil that gives us our spaghetti bolognese and our glass of Coke and our chicken sandwich or our Greek salad. I spent 18 months driving a desk, trawling through loads of literature from the scientific community. I spent 3 months on the road, driving around cities and visiting people around South Africa. And then I spent 9 months disappearing into that strange existential cave that you have to go into when you write. And what I produced was The Hungry Season, Feeding Southern Africa's Cities, which was launched recently. I discovered a number of things during this process, which obviously I can't go into all of it right now, but a couple of things became very evident. The first thing is that food security from the perspective of the city dweller, you and me, is not about whether or not there's enough food around. There's plenty of food around. It's about how you and I access that food, and it's about the choices we make when we do have that food. The other thing I discovered, which was quite alarming, is that the city does make us fat and sick. A lot of these statistics won't be that new to you. In South Africa, 55% of all adults are either overweight or obese. And there's absolutely no judgment in that. I spent most of my own adult life on the softer side of my ideal goal weight, so we all know what it's like to struggle with these kinds of things. But the truth is that we are getting fatter, and this is mirroring what's happening in the developed world, where we've seen skyrocketing obesity rates since the 1970s. And of course with this comes sickness. In South Africa, the related diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, certain cancers associated with being overweight, the cumulative effects of these chronic lifestyle-related illnesses are now becoming a greater risk to our health as a country than the traditional bad ones like HIV and TB, the communicable diseases. And interestingly enough, even in the developed world, and we'll probably see the same happening here, this kind of obesity rate is starting to reverse some of the life expectancy gains that have been made through modern medicine in the past century or so. So what precisely is going on? Well, there's a huge body of literature that looks at why we're getting fat and sick when we move to the city, but it's not a very empathetic literature. And what I try to do with the book is to find real stories of real people to explain our relationship with food and what that means from a sustainability perspective. So what happens? We move to the city and we abandon the peasant foods that we used to live off when we were in rural areas. And I know that it sounds like there's a value judgment there, and it's a very real one, because there are very profound, powerful cultural reasons why we want to abandon the food that we traditionally associate with our culture. We move to the city and we want to eat aspirational foods. We want to eat KFC and Wimpy burgers. We don't want to appear to be poor and rural anymore. The food that's available to us in the city is highly processed. We take in less fibre, less fresh fruit and veg. We increase our fat and salt and sugar intake. We eat more pasta. We eat these strange novel foods that we find in the supermarket shelves. And a lot of this is very cheap, very energy dense food that is available just like that. We don't have to hunt down our food anymore. We don't have to run great miles to get our food. We don't have to burn any calories to get it. We just pop down to the 7-Eleven, exchange a bit of cash, and we're ripping into a bag of Doritos. So why are we eating these foods? Well, there's a wonderful little vox pop that came up in the National Planning Commission's Vision 2030 document, which was released recently. It's a story of a woman who explains how much time she spends every day travelling to and from work. She lives in Alex and she travels through into central Joburg every day. The number of hours she spends commuting is vast. She ends up spending almost half of her wage on transport. At the end of the day, there isn't much money or time left to go shopping, to think about preparing food, to cook it up slowly, to sit down at the table, to eat it with her children. And this is typical of what the modern urban lifestyle is doing to us. More of us in the family are entering the workplace so that we can earn money. That means we're cutting the tether that we had with the kitchen and that slow social communal relationship that we had with both the family and the food. So we're now eating on the trot, we're foraging as we go through the city, and the food that is available to us, because this food has to have a long shelf life, because it's very far from the soil that produced it, it tends to be highly processed and low in nutrition. So the other thing is that this food is highly, highly addictive. We don't like to admit this, but it really is. And I think we're going to start to see fast food and sugary foods as treated, well, basically it's the next tobacco. Sugar in particular, I think, is the next tobacco. This is highly addictive food. And the other thing, of course, is that this vast sprawling city, and we heard our speakers earlier talking about how it pushes us off our feet and into motorized transport. It's much harder to move safely in a city like this. In fact, 3 weeks ago, I watched a young man die at an intersection at a very ordinary suburban street down in Claremont area. Turned out he was 22 years old and he was delivering pizzas, probably to fund a study of sorts. And he just connected at the wrong moment with a BMW. And half an hour before that, while I was drinking my coffee at Vida Cafe, there was a young man alive whose entire life was before him. Maybe the chance of having kids, learning Spanish, travelling into Namaqualand. His entire life lay ahead of him, and then just like that, his motorcycle connected with a car, and every memory of the 5-year-old that stubbed his toe or the 10-year-old that climbed a tree just started fading away as the paramedics worked his chest and tried to get oxygen to his brain, and they couldn't. Now, this is the city that we live in. It's not safe to move on 2 wheels. Obviously, he was motorized, but cyclists and runners, it's not safe to move around on the roads. We have to completely rethink the way our cities operate. And in poorer communities, it's just not safe to step outside of the house in many respects. You hear so many stories of kids who get home from school at the end of the day. The parent, if a parent is home, will lock them basically inside their lounge, and that's where they'll stay for the rest of the day, because it's not safe to run out in the streets. And that's, particularly for young girls, for instance, has repercussions for their bone strength later in life. All these little things we don't think about. The obesity that is happening, though, in the city, is in the developing world city, is a peculiar one. It's unusual. It links to an invisible hunger problem, because we are poor in many respects, but we have access to highly energy-dense nutrient-poor food that's very, very cheap. And it drives out the immediacy of hunger without necessarily giving us our long-term nutritional requirements. So we can bulk up on these foods and get fat, but at the same time we are malnourished at a micronutrient level. And this is peculiar to the developing world and is increasingly hitting the radar of organizations like the World Health Organization and UNICEF and so many of these organizations that are worried about how we have this double burden of disease now, particularly in poorer communities, because people now have the chronic lifestyle-related illnesses associated with being overweight, but then they are also malnourished at micronutrient level, which compromises the immune system and has all sorts of other implications. So there's an interesting discussion that goes on around this. In the old days, in fact, until fairly recently, this problem of gaining weight was seen as the problem of the individual. If you get too heavy, it's because you're fat and you're gluttonous. And here I'm using the language of the scientific literature. I'm not putting any value judgments in that at all. But now the scientists are saying we actually need to step back from this and take a new look at this problem. Yes, this doesn't mean that the individual must not take responsibility for their choices. And Ian's talk was wonderful in that it shows certain very primal drivers behind why we think and do and behave in the way that we do. Now the scientific community is saying we need to look at this modern urban life. This habitat that we roam in every day couldn't be further removed from the savannas where we once chased down ungulates in order to get meat. It couldn't be further removed. So now they're saying it's time to, well, this rising obesity rate, they're saying, is the normal response of normal people to an abnormal environment. They're saying that the modern urban cityscape makes it too easy to make the wrong health lifestyle choices and too hard to make the right ones. So how do we fix the problem? Well, hopefully that's what many of you will be thinking about, because we have to change the city space that we live in, how we move in it, how we relate to food in it, the kinds of food that's available to us in it. But there's something else that I want to focus on specifically today, and that is the idea that the fast food industry has had unfettered access to us as a market for too long. The fast food industry is only required to get safe food to us. It's not required to get healthy food to us. So I think that it's time to start applying the principle that comes from environmental law of the polluter pays. If you're mining a mine and you pollute a wetland, you are required to then cover the cost of mopping up the damage, cleaning the wetland. I think it's time to start looking at the industrial food processes and the fast food industry in particular as a polluter of the nutritional landscape, because they've been accessing our markets, feeding us addictive food, getting us sick, but then the state has to mop up the damage by paying for the medical costs of so many people who then require insulin for diabetes, various medications to deal with high cholesterol, etc., etc. So how about finding a way to get the polluter to pay to clean up some of the nutritional damage that is being caused to our country? And the other thing is to protect our children. Again, referring back to Ian's talk about the development of the brain, teenagers and children and young adults are particularly vulnerable, not only to the addictive nature of these foods, but to the marketing messages that are being sent out by the fast food industry. So youngsters are still very much driven by the limbic system in the brain. It's an impulse-driven brain. It wants immediacy, it wants satisfaction right now. It hasn't developed the strong frontal adult brain that only really matures at the age of about 25 onwards, where you develop executive function and you can think long-term and you can plan long-term and you can deal with the immediacy of your drive to buy that junk food right now. So we need to think of ways of protecting our kids from this, what the scientific literature is saying is a very predatory nature of the fast food industry, both in terms of how it pushes food at us and the way it produces the foods. I really think that we will start to see health warnings on sugary products. I think one of the easiest ways to deal with the ill health and rising obesity rates is just to stop drinking calories, particularly sugar. We don't need to drink sugar, it's not good for us. Even fruit juice, you know, it's much, much better to eat the fruit rather than to drink the fruit juice. And I think one day we will see health warnings on sugary drinks. And, you know, some people are even saying, you know, maybe it's time for the city to start thinking about restricting access of certain fast food outlets to our schools. You know, maybe there should be there should be a set distance between the nearest KFC and McDonald's and your local school. And certainly individuals need to think about lobbying to maybe not have some of these foods available to our kids, because the patterns that you learn in your adolescence are extremely difficult to break once you become an adult. So this isn't saying, though, that we have to abdicate responsibility. We still have to find ways to make smart choices around what we eat and why we eat it. But if we can understand the nature of the strange new habitat that we roam in, we might be slightly better equipped to deal with what is becoming one of the biggest healthcare problems in the country. Thank you.
And I'm going to come and share with you today a couple of numbers, three numbers I'm going to tell you, which I believe are very important, and I'm going to tell you what those numbers are now. I want you to write them down, I want you to burn them into your memory. Number 48, number 38, and number 63. Please write those numbers down, please remember those numbers, because that's the essence of my message today. But before I share this message with you, I want to tell you a little bit of something about being a change agent. I participated a while ago in an international publication, a book that has been put together by two of my Dutch colleagues. They were interested in the water sector, and particularly about policy entrepreneurs that they call. Individual, what we would call a change agent, that actually initiated change in the water sector, and they wanted to document these cases worldwide. And I participated in that particular event. It came out as a book. And what we learned from that is that change agents invariably do not survive the change that they initiate. That is an important message that I'm going to share today. So I, as a change agent, cannot survive the change that I've initiated. I can only do it with you. So therefore, I'm passing the baton on to you with those three numbers, 48, 38, and 63. What you have in front of you there is a mine dump. It's an area that I'm working in at the moment with some of the rehabilitation of some of these highly devastated landscapes. This is the subject or the product of 120 years of mining. Wetland, within 100 meters of that water cannon is a wetland, one of the most affected wetlands in the country, and I'm hoping to rehabilitate that. It's an ambitious dream. I cannot do it alone, so I would like you to please join me on this process. Where do I put this thing in? Technology is not my strongest point. I'm a technophobe. Help me.
I think over here to the right.
Where?
There is the projector.
Aha. Okay, so where are we today? In my humble professional opinion, and it's only an opinion, we are actually on a transition from one economic paradigm to another. So how do we understand this? Technology is letting me down. If we think of value on a vertical axis and time on a horizontal axis, this is roughly what we've done in the past in converting our water and other natural resources to economic output. We've now reached a point where I believe we've got three fundamental constraints that we need to understand. The first fundamental constraint is human capital. And it's not only human capital in government, in the regulatory environment, because there's an acute constraint there, but it's other human capital at, for example, level of the board of directors, executive management of big corporations, who understand how to do things the way they've done it in the past, but don't understand what they need to do things in the future. So human capacity is a major constraint of ours. And the second constraint that we all know about in this country is energy. And I don't know if you know about this, but for every kilowatt hour of electricity that we produce in this country, we burn roughly 1 kilogram of coal, and we evaporate roughly 1.5, in fact 1.4 liters of water. Water is our energy constraint, not coal, and we need to understand that because it's got profound implications. And of course, that brings us to the third constraint, which is water capacity. And that's where those three numbers come from, the number 48, 38 and 63. This is where we are now. We are floating around there, unable to create employment, lots of angry people